All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks, Maria, very much for the introduction. Won't take too much of your time. Simply what we need to do is try to explain to you what the program is about. So about this time last year, the Prime Minister stood up and suggested that the NHS lead an absolutely novel initiative worldwide, and that is for the NHS to sequence 100,000 patients. And those are split up into 3 different areas: those with cancer, those with rare diseases, and those with infectious diseases. So essentially at the end of the 5-year tranche, the idea is that 30,000 patients with a rare disease for which the underlying genetic cause is unknown will have been recruited. But before one launches obviously into doing 100,000 straight away, all of the bells and whistles need to be sorted out. How are we actually going to do this? Who's going to do it? And what's going to happen to all the information that is generated through this so-called sequencing program? So you've heard from Richard a very nice introduction, so I don't have to go into what sequencing necessarily is, but the purpose really is to generate as much information from A to Z about individuals' genomes. And the idea here, as Maria has already said, is to start off with our involvement in the 2,000 sample pilot, which has to be set in place by January. So it's a short order that we've been asked to get involved with. And we've already set in train here across UCLP. What do I mean by UCLP? I'm talking about Moorfields Eye Hospital, I'm talking about UCLH, and I'm talking about Great Ormond Street Hospital. We've set into train a very precise operations procedure. In other words, what we're using is what's called our clinical research facility that is based here in the hospital, and we're opening for several weekends leading up until Christmas and again in the new year, where we're inviting people who might be interested in submitting a single blood sample to take part. So the benefit of opening obviously at the weekend is quite clearly we all have busy lives, we're at work, we're at school or what have you. So if you can't make it up during a week, there's an opportunity to come up at a weekend. So that's all set in train. Now what is actually required? Now we do need from any individual where you feel that there is a child or an adult who has a particular condition, what we consider it to be a genetic condition, and this would clearly be ideal for a lot of members of SWAN. What we really require is a single blood sample from that individual and their parents, their biological parents, mum and dad. That isn't set in stone, but that is the preferred combination, the preferred trio. If there are only 2 available, or if there are 4 available, even better. And what we really want you to do is think about getting involved, and I don't know whether we've got a process or what have you for after this particular talk. We'll be at the coffee break. We may leave a sheet out, for example, which you might want to write your name and just your telephone number, and someone can contact you to explain things in more detail after you've also had a look at the information sheet in the pack as well, in case you might be interested in taking part in this particular study. So I need to just say a couple of words about what's going to happen. So in the new year, all of these samples, well actually it's not just in the new year, it's actually on a daily basis, we send the blood samples to the distributing lab in Cambridge, at Cambridge University, who will extract the DNA and throw all of the other stuff away. We don't need to have the red cells and the white cell and the serum and all that kind of stuff. We actually just need the white cells from which the DNA is extracted and then stored. In January, what happens is then that DNA will be sent to a firm called Illumina, based also in Cambridge, and they will sequence those 2,000 samples once all of those 2,000 samples are already collected. And when they have done that, the sequence information that Richard showed you, for example, or that stream of letters that comes out and the order in which they're configured, will essentially be generated and held on a very safe server, so a computer server, which is behind what we call the NHS firewall. So there is no chance, as is the case with all our confidential medical information, there is no chance that anyone else can access that, unless you're extremely clever, obviously. But that is held behind the NHS firewall. The purpose then is for not only clinicians to be able to access that information in the future, but also for analysis teams. They could be academics, they could even be in the commercial setting, a commercial company, would go in and have a look at this information, very tightly regulated, so they have to prove that they're working towards patient benefit, either perhaps creating medical tests, perhaps looking at therapies or developing therapies. But the idea is that they might like to go in and look at this information, which would be, once we've put it all together, would be immensely valuable to be able to go forward to the next level, which is better managing disease and thinking about targeting new therapies and this kind of thing. So that's the ultimate aim. I'm sure I've left a couple of things out, but I'm happy to answer any questions as we go on. Have I left anything out that we need to talk about?
Parents consent on behalf of themselves.
Yes, and parents need consent on behalf of themselves for their own information to be included in this study, but they also obviously need to consent on behalf of their child, if they're under 16.
Right,
Okay.
so the question is, what's the difference between the 100,000 Genomes program and the DDD?
Well, the main difference is that this is the whole genome, so it's a whole genome sequencing. DDD is not doing whole genome sequencing at the moment. They're moving into whole exome sequencing, and I don't necessarily want to go into, because there are better people to answer the differences between DDD and its actual purpose. However, what we will say is that, again, DDD is well into the swing of things. I think it finishes in April 2015. This program will finish 5 years hence from last year. So there is going to be overlap, but their functions are actually quite different.